Hello and welcome back to the Social Jar Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Dan Wiseman, and I am joined by Andreas Giorgio to dive into the wild and wacky world of social media once again. Subscribe if you're new to the show, wherever you're listening, and if you enjoy it, drop us a tweet, let us know your thoughts, because today we are discussing a problem that we've seen in a recent study by Deloitte as to whether social media is getting boring. But before we get into all of that, mate, we've got some news which certainly isn't boring. You've been giving out some awards. Your expertise in social media has come to the fore. They've been recognising, and you're now awarding others for their contributions to the world of socials, haven't you, mate?
Mate, you know what? Handing out awards before I even get them. That's incredible. It's incredible, right? No, it was fantastic. Last week being in... not last week, well, however long ago it was, this time just blends differently when you're in social media. But we were at the 2021 in 2022 IMF World Championships, which took place in Abu Dhabi in the UAE. And of course, at that event, there was the Amateur MMA Awards, which is an event that IMF host every year to, give recognition to people that have done amazing things in the sport. And they asked me this year to hand out and to actually select the winner of a Best on Social Media award, which would be given to a federation who had done great work on digital platforms. And I chose the French MMA Federation, who are relatively new. MMA was only legalized in France just a few years ago, and they've done a tremendous job to develop the sport in France, but also doing that digitally as well to grow awareness about what they're doing with MMA in France, and they deserved it. And it was a pleasure to be able to hand that award out, mate. So very, very enjoyable time in Abu Dhabi, and we'll be back there again very soon for the Youth World Championships with IMAF, who are of course our clients.
Very exciting, mate. But it was obviously, you'd had some practice in giving out some awards, because here at the uniform Christmas party, you did give out the uniformies. So in terms of importance, the one of the IMAF's probably, not quite up there.
It's not the uniformies.
It really is up there.
I think, you know what, the uniformies, it was a pilot for the uniformies this year.
It really was, yeah.
We're going to have to film it next year.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think the footage exists of this one, but I don't think that should see the light of day.
No, I think so.
Maybe we stream it next year.
We'll spare you blushes on that one, mate. But enough chit chat, mate. We'll get into the crux of today's episode, which asks the question: is social media getting boring? This is sort of part of a wider online problem that's sort of come to light in the last week. We spotted a study that went on in the Republic of Ireland by Deloitte that conducted a survey with 1,000 consumers that found that 42% had made a recent move to break up their social media habits in 2021. So before we get into all of it, I'll just ask the objective question to you, mate. Do you think social media is getting boring?
An objective question that you're asking the social media manager.
Yes.
Can we be objective? Let's try. Is social media getting boring? I mean, look, if I'm honest with you, Dan, it depends what platform we're talking about. I think to vaguely talk generally about social media being boring, I think it's probably a bit harsh, but there's definitely some platforms more than others, which we've already spoken a lot about on various episodes of this podcast, that they need a bit of an overhaul. They need a bit of a rethink. I'm never good with THs. You know what? A funny story, actually. I only actually learned how to do a TH sound when I was 20.
Oh, wow.
So not longer. Probably
that's already a lot later than I was expecting.
Already a lot later. Or I think I was about 22 or 23. I'm going to say about 22, 23.
So what were you doing before?
I was saying F.
Oh, wow.
Like, thank you.
Oh, like a lisp. But you
no,
don't
not
have,
a lisp.
No,
it's not a lisp. It's just it's just using the letter F.
Well, I'm very proud of you.
No, I know. And do you know how so basically, it was at My Next Match, when I worked at My Next Match, our office manager, Sharon, she's like, why can't you do this? And I was like, I don't know how do I do this? And she went, do this, this and this. And I was in the bathroom as a 22, 23-year-old in the shower going, Sir. And eventually I got it. However, I still stumble over it now. And most of the words on the show, actually, this might be a funny one for the future, but most of the times I stumble on the podcast is when I'm trying to do a TH sound. So bit of trivia there.
Well, there we go. I think we have a future video in the making right there and then,
Definitely.
don't we? Great.
But like, to go back to my original point, before I just went off on the worst tangent ever, the platforms, like,
Yep.
if you're looking at TikTok is very engaging for me. Like, I think we've said so many times, like, we can just sit there for hours and hours and hours and scroll mindlessly and enjoy it and have fun. Whereas, like, you know, we know a lot of people ourselves. Like, now I think we have the conversation. It's like, oh, I don't use Facebook. I don't have a Facebook account. I don't use Twitter. I don't, you know, because they have no enjoyment on it. You know, beyond I think we've actually evolved as humans where, you know, maybe 10 years ago, it was like, I need to be on Facebook so people know what I'm doing. But like, people have evolved beyond that. And now it's like, oh, don't need Facebook. And, you know, that's why some platforms are seeing a downturn in their users.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Facebook because in their recent report, they've actually seen a downturn in daily users for the first time, potentially ever. I think the amount of people on Facebook declined for the very first time. I mean, they're having a whole host of problems that we actually debated talking about this week, but it just feels like we've been talking Meta and Facebook for so long now. They're still very much going through it in that sense. And it's another one of their problems, which we'll come on to talk about later, which was recognized as the platform that's having the biggest problem with this issue, which is Instagram. But, you know, there were other reasons why people were dropping social media in 2021. The second biggest one was too much fake news, which was followed by the content being too negative. People were citing how much time they were spending on the platform as being an issue, privacy concerns, again, something we've spoken about, because it didn't make them feel good about themselves, being another one. And then harassment or bullying, which was mentioned by 5% of those who quit social media in 2021. So we've got a wide array of problems there that have caused quite considerable. So it's 2 in 5 was what the survey led with, but it's actually 42%, as I said, so it's actually slightly more than that. Of people who are sort of making this stop to drop social media. And I think Instagram is a main culprit. This is one that people cited a lot upon doing some research after I saw this survey. It felt like lockdown particularly was a pretty bad time for Instagram, which relies very heavily on visually engaging content. So as people's social lives were halted and major events and sports and holidays were cancelled, the average user's feed became significantly less interesting than it was the year before. This was recognised again in some trends. So in the UK, 18 to 24-year-olds spent 10.5 minutes a day looking on Instagram in September 2020. So that was in the mire of lockdown. And then this was down actually from 15 minutes the previous year. So it's actually almost 5 minutes a day less, which is, you know, almost a third of the time that they were spending originally on Instagram. This was according to Ofcom. So this was recognized in the data as well. So it seems that Instagram is one of the platforms which people are looking to drop the most, but this is a wider problem that we're seeing in social.
Yeah, I think, you know, you got a really good point. Like, when you think about, especially like an Instagram, what do you go on there to see? You go, you know, you're looking on there like how other people are living their lives, essentially. You know, oh yeah, I'm in Dubai or I'm whatever, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And, you know, it's cool to see that, I guess, if you're into that. You know, other people like myself, I use it to keep in updated with, you know, my favorite sports leagues and favorite teams and stuff like that. If you enjoy that professional content, which I know we do, it's great for that. But for the vast majority of people, they're either following their friends and celebrities or, you know, just their friends and family. So if you're going on the content during COVID and everyone's like, great day in the backyard, oh, did a few kick-ups. Don't know, I can't even remember. I mean, what
toilet roll kick-ups, that was a big thing on Instagram. This is all, and the thing is what's weird is about the people that, you know, we went from seeing this kind of content, as you said, mate, people on holiday and major events and people on nights out and stuff like that. But then we made this really weird transition away from that, where we only sort of recognize people doing boring things as soon as someone put on Instagram that they were with someone. What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you putting this on the internet for? So it's like we made this really interesting switch from that being all we wanted to see to then hounding people that did that. Like, obviously there were a few celebrities that like managed to sneak out for some time away and stuff like that, and they got into some pretty hot water about it. And so Instagram, I think, has sort of like struggled to recover from that in a way. And I think it's one of those platforms where people are now being sort of commended for stepping away from that platform.
Well, don't forget as well, when we did our episode on the Facebook files, we talked about the reports discussing the toxicity of Instagram and the effect that had, especially on younger girls. And, you know, definitely because it has always had that almost, I don't want to, like, bikini influencer culture. it has a reputation now. Instagram, you go on there and everything you're scrolling through, and it's Aaron Chalmers telling you to, take a new protein drink or whatever it is. You know what I mean? It's usually the Geordie Shore people, but there's always an influencer telling you to do something, and that has really that really took over Instagram. And like you said, all these influencers going to Dubai and stuff like that. It doesn't surprise me that toxicity in Instagram is finally a melting point, really. So, yeah, in terms of being boring, for me, I was bored a while ago with all that, to be fair.
Yeah, it's something that I think people are getting it seems that people are now starting to wake up a little bit more to what's going on social media and becoming quite fed up with it, to be honest, across the board, which I think is something that the major platforms need to recognize, because whether it be privacy issues or ethical ones, or merely whether they're that bothered anymore, people are dropping social media and they're being commended for doing it. As I said, people that are taking breaks from platforms or deleting them altogether. It's seen as a sort of mental therapy that people are sort of applauded for doing. Like, if you see someone say, like, no, I'm for my mental well-being, I'm taking a step away from Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, people are like, yeah, good for you. That's a good thing to do. So I think that's an interesting trend in itself. And I think it's something that we sort of, if we're going to step into the metaverse and this world of Internet 2.0, that's something that we need to tackle, don't you think? Because in order to step into that immersive world, you've got to have a community which are willing to do so.
Look, the thing about social media is news based. Everything on social media is either news or it's reaction to news or hypotheses of news. It's that word. Have I done it again? Anyway, it's one of three things, and one of them definitely doesn't sound right. You know what I mean? Everything's about news. Yep. People are just like, oh, Donald Trump did this. Oh, yeah, everything was about that. Oh yeah, look, the African Cup of Nations is on. Like, even for us, like IMAF World Championship, the engagement level increased for IMAF because all the fans were on there to discuss that particular event. When nothing is happening on social media, because even when nothing was happening, like COVID, we were talking about the news that nothing's happening. So the news of nothing happening became the news, and therefore it was still, increasing. And during that time, we've talked about the numbers before, social media actually grew during that time period. But it's like people are bored when nothing happens on social media. So if nothing happens, they find something to happen. So it's like, what controversy can we talk about? What's this? That's why all this kind of like gaslighting culture has really started on, social media, and people really, it's vitriolic. I don't know if, a lot of the TikTok comments I see are just horrible.
Yeah,
like Cal the Dragon gets it
him,
so hard, man. I feel real bad for him. But, all these things that people are really just, going in on negatively. Like you say, like, people, no wonder people are fed up of social. Like, when you scroll through the comments and everything's a hate comment, well, why are you going to engage? And then you go on Twitter, and every discussion, it's not a discussion, it's a debate, it's an argument. No matter what your views are, they're wrong to somebody else. And people are fed up of that. People hate this idea, in my opinion, that a space which used to be for different groups and different members of various communities to talk within their own bubble has, that bubble's burst, and now you've got somebody who can jump into any conversation and she's like, you're wrong. Oh no, actually I'm definitely not. No, you're wrong. And then his mate comes in and goes, you're wrong. And then his friend comes in and goes, you're wrong. And you're just getting told all day, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And that's why people hate social, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think, because it's interesting. We saw it a lot with the sort of point in case, I think, has to be Molly May, right? Because, she was in pretty hot water back in January, really, over some comments she made, some infamous comments, I think now, she made about there being, everyone's got the sort of same 24 hours in a day as everyone else, so everyone's sort of got an equal opportunity in that sense. But that podcast wasn't new. Someone just, like, it all started because, I think she, if I'm correct in saying, I think she did that podcast back in like October, November, and it was fine. Like, no, but someone clipped it and put that clip on social media, and it all started from this one person being like, hang on, Molly May said something which doesn't quite, and it all blew up from there. And I think this is sort of something that we're seeing a little bit more, and I think that's what people are sort of getting a little bit fed up with, perhaps. And as I said, I think when you look at the future, I've seen a lot of people, because we had some pretty big news coming out of Meta recently, in that Zuckerberg changed his profile pictures to one of the avatars that we expect to see sort of roaming the metaverse in years to come. Snapchat had their first ever digital concert, I think it was. It was sort of one of those immersive ones, similar to like what Fortnite did with Travis Scott a few years ago. They had one of those. I saw a post, I think it was from Complex, who are quite big on socials, and they sort of said, this is happening with the metaverse, like where do we all stand? And I think people are starting to wake up and go, I don't know if this is for me. This feels a bit of a step too far. I think when you talk about people joining social media, sort of, if you say 2008, around that period, just before we hit the 2010s, people were joining in to check up what their auntie's doing on a holiday, or like connect with long lost friends from university. And then all of a sudden people are seeing this transition to this all singing or dancing, totally immersive world, and going, whoa, this isn't what I joined for.
Exactly. And that's the evolution of social media to become an escapism, a form of escapism, is one of its biggest downfalls, is that people spend so much time immersed in this world where in reality you might just be an average person who just goes to work every day, does their job, goes home. But on social media, you've got 100,000 followers, 100,000 people lingering on your every word, no matter how controversial it might be. This is the problem. It's that it gives a voice to everybody. Mark Goddard, actually, who's a famous referee for UFC and works with IMAF, something that whenever you talk about social media with him, he always says, the best thing about social media is that, you can talk to anybody. And the worst thing about social media is pretty much the same thing, is that everybody is able to put their opinion in stuff that sometimes we don't need their opinions in. So, I just genuinely think that people are burnt out from social. Platforms aren't doing as much as they used to. Like, if you remember during the heyday of the Trump campaign for election, like Facebook and Twitter were taking some really strong stances in terms of trying to stop hate speech and stop all these kind of violent protests and violent message spreading and fake news spreading. And after that, it's gone back to, because Trump's not there anymore, we've gone back to normal. I mean, that stuff still exists on the platforms, and it's almost like, well, because we're not getting scrutiny anymore, we don't really need to do anything. And, that's the biggest thing. People are like, this hasn't changed. I don't want to be on these platforms anymore. And like you said with the beginning of the show, the numbers show that, it's down. Yep. And there are many, many reasons. And I think that's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. And, as the professionals, we see both the good and the bad in social media. And there's a lot of good. I think it's, it's important to preface. It's amazing when you see social media used in the right way. And even in a professional sense, when you see a client achieve the goals that they wanted to, or like the IMAFs are a really good example, because you spotlight nations and you see the engagement from nations who send, only a few fighters to these competitions, and they go on to achieve some incredible things. And the engagement that you get, based on their athletes' performance is quite amazing. It's always heartwarming, I think, when you see social media used in that way. But we see the bad in it as well, and there's definitely two sides of that coin. And so platforms, I think, now face a very interesting position where there is obviously that major rebrand from Meta, and they're sort of the leading light. They've taken the beacon into that transition into Internet 2.0. But the norm and the rest of society seems to be a bit hesitant, and there's plenty of people that aren't totally on board with this idea of this immersive world surrounded by NFTs and cryptocurrency and all this crazy stuff. So what do? Do they try and appease these people, perhaps go back to their roots and find what was it about social media that first got people on board and try and reignite that? Or do you simply just follow the crowd? I mean, and inevitably they are just going to follow the crowd because no one wants to be left behind. But I think that is the problem, is that I think you are eventually going to leave a lot of people behind who, as I said, have got to this point now where they're seeing social media and think, nah, this isn't doing what it used to do for me. And it'd be a really interesting year, I think, in 2022, because we've seen quite a lot of high-profile changes at a lot of the platforms, Twitter especially, and they've released some new features, which I'm really excited to see how they do in 2022. Hopefully this is the year we finally get Twitter Blue and stuff like that. So it looks like it's set to be a big year. And I'm interested to see what major platforms trying to bring people back into social media for the reasons that they got into it in the first place. Amen. Well, there's I couldn't say any better myself. Yeah, definitely agree. I think, it's one that we're going to have to keep an eye on it, mate. And I think there's certainly a lot of platforms. I think TikTok, you're right to give a shout out to, because there still feels something new about that. And it's sort of, you go onto TikTok and it's a new app, which compared to, considering how long we've had the old ones, it still feels very new and it still feels very exciting when you're on it. And I like that. And I think that will still stick around. So I think, perhaps that isn't one of the platforms that is getting boring. And I think obviously a lot of how you use the platform ultimately decides that. But yeah, as I said, it's going to be a big year, mate. I'm looking forward to seeing how it changes, what happens with social, and hopefully we get some reports to the contrary where people are getting back into the social media for the reasons that they wanted to originally, and it's a better place all for it. What do you think?
Definitely.
100%.
Definitely.
So, guys, if you've enjoyed this episode, I know he have, we'd love to know your thoughts. Drop us a tweet on Twitter if you've watched it anywhere, wherever you are. Subscribe as well. And make sure if you're watching on YouTube, you hit that bell icon and you'll never miss an upload from us on The Social Jar.
Never, ever miss.
Why would you want to? Why would you want to? The
to?
number one place for all your social media news is right here. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.